Shalom Aleichem. Bayom HaShmini. Today is Monday. It's Aleph Mar Cheshvan. It's the second day of Chodesh Mar Cheshvan Hey Tafshin Pei Dalet. And the Eibush still has some explaining to do. Kvayochel. I was in Marston Thursday night last, and if I bring for a bar mitzvah, and if I bring for bar mitzvah, you talk about the bar mitzvah maimer, and of course one of the ideas in the bar mitzvah maimer is the idea that there's a concept of sleep l'mayla, even for shlofen. There's the idea of sleeping in the Eibush that sleeps. The maimer is a very Kabbalistic maimer. It's not an easy maimer that the 13-year-olds learn. I always say that the chasana maimer, which you learn when you're getting married, is far easier than the bar mitzvah maimer, which you're learning when you're. It's probably the first maimer Hasidus that many boys learn, and it's quite a difficult maimer. But one of the themes of the maimer is shlafen, sleeping, and of course the idea is that there's no shinu. I can't say Hashem sleeps, but his relationship with the world looks like sleep. And that's the inyan from the Megillah Sester, Balayla Hahu, Nodashnas Hamelach, and then you have the Maimorim, Ani Yisheni Begalusa V'libi Eid, this Maimorim Chasidus that talk about what sleep means, Beruch Nis HaInyanim, and what it means, K'layachal, the Eibishter wakes up. For what happened, Simchas Teda to have happened, there was an inyan of Shina. Sailamayla and Sailamata, there was an inyan of sleep on high, and there was an inyan of sleep down here. There's no other way to explain it. I spoke after Simchas Teda, and I said, can you say Leiv Malachim V'Sara B'Yad Hashem applies to Bailei B'chira? And several people sent me sichas from the Rebbe, which indicates that the Rebbe said publicly that since a Yid, even a Bal B'chira, is only an individual, and when he's in a position of Malchus and Soros, he's responsible for many people. So although he's a Bal B'chira, when it comes to his Malchus and to his Soros, Leiv Malachim V'Sara B'Yad Hashem applies also to Jewish people. So this is Ratzon Elyon. What's the kavanah shebedover? One thing is for sure. Two things are for sure. Number one, the Avoda Hashem b'simcha, at least till Zayin Cheshvan Zicher, because in the world of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, till Zayin Cheshvan is Achan Sheb Yisrael is still coming back from Yom Tov, and there's still the spirit of Yom Tov. And number two, that we have to see the Yisrael Mitech HaCheshach. We will see, we'll be zeichet to see the Yisrael Mitech HaCheshach, Hashem will take off Mayad Mamish, Schneller. Now, Rabbi say, as you know, I'm trying to catch up in the Maimorim. This is the 6th of 9 Maimorim that the Rebbe spoke in Chodesh Tishrei. The 6th of 9 Maimorim. If you count, okay, you want to say that the last one was Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, so that's not Tishrei. But Simchas Teda was on a Sunday. Simchas Teda was on a Friday. So Isru Chag, which is Chav Daled, was Shabbos. So the next Shabbos was Rosh Chodesh. It was Aleph Cheshvan. But if you include that, you have 9 Maimorim. This is the 6th of those 9 Maimorim. Bayom HaShmini Atzeres, and then there's 2 Maimorim of Shabbos, which Bechlal and all the Hanochas, the old Sefer of Hanochas don't even exist. Teres Menachem, the Lahak, found 2 Maimorim, a Tamtzis, just a Kitzur of Maimor of Bereshis. And then that same day, later in the day, there was a second Fabrengen. And the Rebbe said this again, and this Maimer they have Ariches, and I think the Dibra Maschos Eisner Floyd Gedels Levade Kili Elam Chaste. And then of course there's a Maimer of Pashas Neach, which was Rosh Chodesh. I think it's Hashem Kisi. But let's learn this Maimer, this Maimer of Simchas Teda. Now I'm not going to call this Maimer the Hemshech to the 3 Maimerim before, but the Rebbe keeps referencing various points that he made in the Maimerim earlier, not just in the Maimerim of Sukkos, the 3 Maimerim of Sukkos, but also the Maimerim of Rosh Hashanah, and even Maimerim of Zayim Tchilas Masechah before Rosh Hashanah. A lot of the ideas that the Rebbe had been saying in the weeks leading up to Simchas Teda come back in this Maimer. It's a short Maimer, it's 4 Amudim and a little bit, it's not a long Maimer. And if I had to divide this Maimer in 2, which I don't think I'm going to do, I'm going to start teaching, and depending on how the time goes, I'll determine whether it's going to be 1 class or 2 classes. I'm hoping to teach us all in 1 class. The Maimer has 2 points. One point, which I'm calling the beginning and the end, although it's not mamish the beginning and the end, is two ways of understanding Shmini Atzeres, based on two Midrashim. One Medrash is that the Eibishter says, make for me a small Su'uda. And the other Medrash is, the one that's more famous, Bayom HaShmini, they spent a whole week with everybody else, and everybody else leaves, and he sits with his favorite, and he says, Bayom HaShmini. And the Rebbe asks, the Frierdiker Rebbe asks in the Yer Tadash, Tav Shin Dalet, and our Rebbe repeats it in this Maimer, what is the meaning of these two Midrashim? And the answer that the Rebbe gives is an idea which has come up in early Maimarim as well, including this particular Lachem, that the first Medrash, Tasli Sudas Ktana, is talking about the Avoda of the Nefesh HaElokis by itself. And then the Bayom HaShmini is talking about the Nefesh HaElokis together with the Nefesh HaBahamis. And when you learn this, we're going to be learning it momentarily, you struggle with a simple question. There's two Midrashim that both describe Shmini Atzeres. One describes Nefesh HaElokis alone, and the other describes Nefesh HaElokis together with the Nefesh HaBahamis. And in both cases you say, it's a Yidden alone, which is higher. So the Maimer of Elokachtam Lachem, the Avoda with the Nefesh HaBahamis is higher than the Avoda of the Nefesh HaElokis. In the Maimer of Shmini Atzeres Lachem, the Avoda of the Nefesh HaElokis by itself, Naran, Chaya Yechid and Yachid, is higher than the Avoda with Nefesh HaElokis and Nefesh HaBahamis together. And it's not really Tarta the Sasre, it's based by it's two perspectives. So this is the culminatory Maimer of Tishrei, this is the last Maimer, this is the Maimer of Simchas Teda. And when you learn this, you ask yourself, if the Su'uda Shmini Atzeres can be explained as being the Nefesh HaElokis alone, where you don't even have to say Ein Lezrim, there's no guy that you have to exclude, there's no Malach that you have to exclude. And then the other one, over there you have to say Ein Lezrim, the guy is not welcome, the Malach is not welcome, which is higher. Is the Avoda with Nefesh HaElokis alone higher, or is the Avoda with Nefesh HaElokis together with the Nefesh HaBahamis, where you have to say Ein Lezrim, higher? And it's unclear. It's unclear. I'll come back to it when we learn it inside. That's one half of the Maimer. I'm calling that the beginning and the end. Then the majority of the Maimer, more than half, is simply explaining the statement that Shmini Atzeres is only for Yidden, to the exclusion of everybody else. And there is a number of discussions. Number one, who is Adam? Who are these aliens that need to be excluded? Obviously, if somebody could be included, and then you have to say disinclude them, they have to be they have to be worthy to be considered to be included, and therefore you have to say that they're disincluded, that they're excluded. Who is in the category of Zarim? And basically it's going to come on Goyim, who bringing the ayam Purim abroad for them, and I'm going to add this. This means Goyim will keep Shevet Mitzvahs B'nei Nech, and they serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'chuli. And then the second is the Malachim, that in spite of their milas, they're not included in the Avoda of Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Teda. Now the Rebbe is going to explain at length. I mean, it's about the Maimer is 4 pages. I would say 2.5 of these 4 pages deal with the question. So the decision that I made was, we're first going to learn the beginning and the end, the two Midrashim about what makes Shmini Atzeres special. Then we're going to go back and learn the section of Yehil L'Chalavadacha Ve'ein L'Zadimitacha. Okay, so let's go. Let's start from the beginning. Bayom HaShmini on the 8th day, which is on page 30 in the Sefer Maimorim Tavshin Lamed Daled. Bayom HaShmini on the 8th day, Atzeres. Tielachem, a day of Atzeres, which means pause, hesitation, hold up. Atzeres, you'll see soon, also means Meloshan Malchus, kingship. And Atzeres is sometimes translated from the word ascents. Shmini, Meloshan ascents. So on the 8th day there's an Atzeres, you pause. Maybe as a behemshech the Frierdiker is Maimer from the year 1943-44, which was 30 years before the Rebbe said this Maimer, which means it's 80 years before you and I are sitting here and having this conversation. Because we're learning these Maimarim in Tafshin Pei Daled, 50 years after the Yom Kippur War, 50 years after Tafshin Lamed Daled, which is 80 years after Tafshin Daled, Mashapir, Shasha, La Pasuk, Rashi says on the Pasuk, Molem HaMakim, the Eibush says to the Jewish people. This is a Rashi, it's a Chazal Rashi. I'm requesting of you, Asuli, so the Ketana make for me a small meal, I should have pleasure from you. Now what is attached by Bayom HaShmini? Hashem says to the Jewish people, make me a little meal, I want to enjoy you and you alone. And the Rebbe asks, the question is, What does it mean that the Eibush is delighted and pleasure from the food that we make him? That on the 8th day there is a lachem, there's an event which happens between Yidden and the Eibush where nobody else is included. That's the first question. What does this mean? Hana that the Eibush has from Yidden alone. Now skip the number 10 and go to the number 2. And the second question is, how is this Pirush Rashi, which the Friedrich brings in his Maimah from Shtas Tadash, consistent? With the more familiar Medrash. It's analogous to a king who also made a bill for 7 days. They invited everybody. Medina in the country, with the 7 days of feasting. When the 7 days pass, the king says to his beloved, come, let us tumble, you and I. What we're going to find left over, like it says in Chazal, that when you eat a feast for many days, the greatest dinner is the first day. I think this is counterintuitive by today's cultural standards, but as I state in Chazal, and I think it even in Halacha, that the biggest meal is the first day. So B'mashatim means what's leftovers. Then it calls a mash, which indicates Shasud, the Shmini says that the meal of this 8th day is Eisei ha'inyan shahaya b'seuda l'chol b'nei ha'medina. It's the same basic idea as the feast which we had the 7 days before, which was all the people of the country. But now you're saying it's just me and you. How can you have another day of feasting, which is consistent with the 7 days of feasting which came before it, but at the same time it's lachem, which is the l'chol. Now it's exclusive for the Jewish people. You have a Rashi, which I'm going to call the first Midrash, and then the famous Midrash. Rashi says, make a party between me and you, just me and you. Okay, there's nobody else involved. But the second Midrash is saying that we just finished partying for a week, and now everybody else left. And we're saying, so the question becomes, if the feast of Shmini Atzeres is a hemshech, is a continuation of the feasting of the first 7 days, which we did together with all the people, what is the meaning of ein lezרים? This is the question. And the answer is on page 32, which we're going to go to now, and read the number 3. V'zehu. And now, the word v'zehu doesn't go on what we read in the the pages that I skipped. The word v'zehu goes on the whole Tishrei, on what the Rebbe said in Memorim Zayim Tchos Masecho, what the Rebbe said in Shira Malachim Makim, what the Rebbe said in the Maimah Shuv Yisrael, what the Rebbe said in the Maimah Ulukachtem L'chem Bayom HaShmini, what the Rebbe said in the Maimah Bayom HaShmini. I'm sorry, B'stukah Seishu Shivas Yomim, and the Maimah that the Rebbe said, V'asisa Chag HaSukkos Tasa Shivas Yomim La'avaya. It's a culmination of the whole Tishrei. That on Tishrei is a time of it's a time of Pnimius. The highest levels of the Yiddish and Neshama are encountering Elokis at the highest levels. And the Lashon HaGemara, it's the Gili of the Gemidas Arachmim, Kam B'yochad, Kam B'tzibur. Or Lashon from Chasidus, it's a time of Kirav and Moira Litzitz. And all of this happens in a way of a renewal. Chodesh Tishrei, the deepest levels of godliness touch, the deepest levels of Yidden and Neshama in a revealed way to reset the relationship between Hashem and the Jewish people. And by extension between the Eibishter and his world on what's called a Pnimius level. Which means he doesn't just keep the world alive so the world shouldn't die. But he invests all of himself into the world as if the world owns him. When the Eibishter is the king of the world, he becomes Liban Shel Kol HaElam, just like a Melech Yisrael is Liban Shel Kol Yisrael. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu becomes Melech HaElam, is Liban Shel Kol HaElam Kulei. The Eibishter Kvayachol belongs to the creation when he becomes a Melech, and the process by which this occurs is that he resides, and we have to renew it on Reish Hashanah, like it says in the Maimon. The Rebbe is mitzayin again to the Maimed of Lahavin and Kiyas Shefer HaKodesh Abba Shem Tov, which is in Siddur, where this idea is presented. And throughout Tishrei, this Pnimius is brought forward more and more. It's in Tkiyas, it's in the Nanakayin Kippurim, it's in the Schach of the Sukkot, in the Alminim of the Lulav, and it culminates in Shmini Atzeres. So it says, V'zeu, everything we discussed over all these Maimorim, this is what Maimir, if you count the 2 Maimorim of Zayim, you have 2 Maimorim of Zayim, 2 Maimorim of Seres Yimei Tshuva, 3 Maimorim of Sukkot, it's 7 Maimorim, including the 2 before Rosh Hashanah, that made this point, that Rosh Hashanah there's an interruption and a renewal of the Pnimistic relation with the Eibishter and the Yidden, and the Pnimistic relation with the Eibishter, and this explains what happens to Shmini Atzeres. The Bayom HaShmini says, Tiyah Lachem. You ran through a whole Tishrei, which is bringing the Pnimius back in the relation with the whole creation. And its high point, its culmination, is Shmini Atzeres. And of course, you know, I always love to say this, that the Welt makes the bigger issue out of Shana Rabbah, like it says in the Zeh, this is the day of the Piskei Tova, and so forth. Chabad makes the bigger issue out of Shmini Atzeres, because they're talking about the Inyanim Pnimiyim and Avoda. And the irony is that the Welt stops saying L'Davod HaShmini and Shmini Atzeres. They say L'Davod HaShmini and Shmini Atzeres as well. And we, who make a bigger issue of Shmini Atzeres, stop saying L'Davod HaShmini and Shana Rabbah. And I find this ironic and strange and odd. So the Rabbi explains Atzeres, who the concept of the Yom HaShmini Atzeres, which is the 22nd day in Tishrei. And if you're counting from Rosh Chodesh Elul, it's the 51st or 52nd day. It's a klita, it's a day of the absorption of Eres V'Giluyim, the lights and revelations, which are all the Madrega Pnimiyos, which are connected to Chodesh Shvi, to the month of Tishrei. The Naved is Rosh Hashanah, what happens in Rosh Hashanah, which we prepared for during Elul. And then we developed over the Aseret Simichuv and the Dalad Yom B'Yim Kippur Sukkos, and then Sukkos, and Dalad Minim, and Simchas Beis HaSheva, and Neshana Rabbah, and Shmini Atzeres is a bak shufones b'necha v'ayavakesh, the pnimius of Yiddish and Neshama seeks the pnimius of Elokis higher than Ishtalshus. Okbavu ebesidid dibera masal havid ki yeshever where Zabashan Delot says now to ebesidid on this Maimer, which the Rebbe must have quoted 4 or 5 times at least in these Maimarim. The Beresh Hashanah chezim advaram latchid musam. Hashanah, everything is reset. And there's a concept called siluk. The pnimius goes away and remains as the chitzenius, or the lashon, like the famous lashon that the pnimius goes away, and all that remains as the chitzenius. Vayde Avoda, the Rashon Avoda, bitl and Kabbalah sailed ki yeshefil b'dur Rosh Hashanah magiyim the pnimius atzmusim v'siyis barach yid touches the pnimius atzmus v'Elokis. And of course, you all know how does a yid touch the pnimius v'Elokis. So in the Maimorim that are Beklau, the idea which is brought is because Yidden Moshe and atzmus. You saw all over Machshava, the famous Tedlim Zitcha Magid, which was mentioned in the Rosh Hashanah Maimer, but in a slightly different way. And then the Shuvi Yisrael Maimer. And then these Maimarim, they bring from Tafshin Gimel and Samach Hey, the idea of Mishain L'Karke L'Yadam, that Dir B'Tachtenim touches Atzmus Hus. In other words, there's 2 reasons why when the Eibishter resigns as a king, we can renew the Melucha from Atzmos, because we can touch Atzmos, A, because of the Shadish of Yidden, and B, because of the Shadish of the Kavanah. The Shadish of Yidden is Yisrael, all of Machshava. The Shadish of the Kavanah, like it says in Rosh Hashanah Maimer, is Mishain Lekarka, Mishain Lebayis, Ein Ayadam. Be that as it may, when the Eibishter resigns, we says he quits, we're able to go and renew it, because we're able to touch him in a place where the cessation, where the siluk did not affect, and we're able to renew it. They just creates a new pnimius that can involve in chiddush hachayis and renewal of pnimius take a life from the highest source and the highest root in atzmos and sabbath. And he continues. He says the same ace as he said in all the Maimarim Misham Mamshichim left pnimius atainu. It comes into tainig of the world, which is the word pnimius. In other words, the tainig which is not about the creation, but the kavanah sabri umipsham the pnimius chachma bina, the chachma bina which is connected to pnimius, which is the chayda teira. Umisham l'pnimius hamidus, which the chayda means mitzvahs. Umisham l'pnimius hamalchus. All in the madreges, how in the world you have something beyond just existence, you have a purpose which is called pnimius. But v'achezanim shacham l'machshov v'dibiru ma'isa nibshepirus hamalchus. The chitzenius hamalchus is levush. But here comes the key point. Zeh peil shinigam b'chitzenius elokis. This pnimius dika bringing forward of Elokis affects obviously the purpose of the creation, and if you're in touch with the inner dimension of the creation, you're sensitive to the Elokis, which is revealed on a pnimius dika level, but it doesn't remain there. The external world, which by itself has very little spiritual definition and value and purpose and worth, is incorporated into this pnimius dika connection also. Now, I wrote on the bottom of your page that you have to add a few words here. And the words that were added, that I wrote in, are from the Maimer that we just learned. I think, from the Maimer of Chag HaSukkos L'Hashem Shivas Yomim, where the Rebbe said that in this Avoda Pnimius, there's 2 basic conditions. The first is Aliyah, going up, which is Tshuva, which culminates, what's called, the Rebbe calls it Ruchnius, and it culminates with the cloud of the Keteiros of Yom Kippurim, filling the Kedesh HaKadoshim, which is the ultimate inyan of spirituality. But then it comes down into the physical inyan of Teiro Mitzvahs, like we discussed in the last Maimer, which is connected to Sukkos, Dalad Minim, and in this Maimid is going to add also Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. So I'm telling you orally the words that I added, which are not in the Maimid, and then we read, and after there's the tshuva of going up in a spiritual journey, coming from heaven to earth. First of all, it's a non-act, which is Ruchnius, but that is Malachim, which is Madrigot Gadisha, which is Tachas HaElokis. And Misham Nimshach l'schacha sukkah, b'chinas makir, it comes down to the schach of the sukkah. And then it's Nimshach b'pnimius, and the Dalad Minim comes b'pnimius, which is two ideas. The Dalad Minim bringing b'pnimius, and also the idea of a sukkah's teishvu is also the makir being brought into pnimius, like I explained to you in the previous Maimon. But then he adds the third thing, Shmini Atzeres Nimshach b'chinas klita. In the previous Maimon, the Rebbe called it pnimius and pnimius mamish. The sukkah is makif, the Dalad Minim is pnimius, and the Shmini Atzeres is pnimius mamish. Here he calls it makif, pnimi, and klita. Makif means that the godliness of Atmos reaches us, but we're just enveloped by it. Pnimi is able to feel it. And klita means we're able to make it our own. It becomes who we are. And that's the chiddush of Shmini Atzeres. And that's why you say, Bayom HaShmini Atzeres, Tia Lachem, the lechol avadach of Shmini Atzeres, is because the whole of Tishrei is pnimi, it's bakru fanai. But there's a unique property to Shmini Atzeres, which has to do with this business of klita, where a Yid's relationship with Elokis on the highest levels is so personal, and now we say it's as a culmination of the whole of Tish. Now I put the next few lines in a box, but I'm going to read them straight. Okay, I'm read them straight through. Because on Shmini Atzeres there is a day of klita, we say that this is a date which is only for Yidden. For the Jewish people alone and for nobody else. And this is particularly so when we appreciate the fact that what happens on Shmini Atzeres in the way of klita has to do with this kashus chelik and Neshama be'etzem. There's a connection between the level of the Neshama called chelik and the etzem. And if you remember the Maimer from the Friedrich Rebbe, which the Rebbe quoted, I think it was in the Maimer, but Sukkos Teishu Shivas Yomim, chelik goes on yechida and etzem goes on yochid. And on these levels we say that etzem kshatetev is bechelk b'miktzah tetev v'kul madreg of etzem, which is madreg of yochid. Each point is the whole thing. And as the Rebbe said in the Maimon, you can't even say din of ma'ilo mat. And because of all of these extraordinarily high inyanim, although earlier in Tishrei and earlier in Sukkot, you say that there is halos hadishem kol goyim shapchul kol omin gavaleinu chaste, like the Rebbe said in the Maimon from Malachim lachem, that the goyim also benefit from the pnimiistic avodah of Sukkos and the gildik avodah simcha avodah of Sukkos when it comes to Shmini Atzeres, which is the avodah, the pnimiistic Neshama of a Yid, it's l'chol avada chavein lezrim mitach. Ve'ein hakavon kan le'etzem Neshama k'mishui l'mayla. But I want you to know, when we talk about etzem Neshama, we don't mean it in some esoteric way. Etzem hashayech la'Neshama b'lebesh the very essence of the Neshama, which is nevertheless connected to the Neshama, which is in the guf. And I think the diuk here is not that it's less, but that it's more. In other words, not that the etzem and Neshama, which is the shaychas to the guf, is lower, but the etzem and Neshama, shaychas to the guf, which is actually higher and more. And even that madrig of the Neshama comes into the guf, in eifin of klita, in eifin of pnimius. And now we say, ein lezrim mitach. Over here, a guy has no shaychas. Now, why he doesn't explain? Why he doesn't explain? We're going to be reading in the next bunch of lines two ideas that the Rebbe is going to say about Neshama Yisrael that don't exist by Goyim and by Malachim. The first is the idea that the Neshama is b'derech mai v'ratzilas tabriya, so wherever it is, it's still connected to Atzmos. And the second idea, which is on top of page 34, is this notion called Das, and I'm assuming he means Das Elyon. And those are going to be the two reasons why, when it comes to Shmini Atzeres, but I don't know, I don't understand fully what is it about Shmini Atzeres that is so transitional, so much beyond the whole inyanim of Tishrei, which we described earlier, that we say, finally, this point, ein lezrim mitach. But now the Rebbe goes to the two Midrashim. We go to the two interpretations of Atzeres Lechem on Shmini Atzeres, where there's a klita of the pnimius v'atmos of Elokis and the pnimius v'atmos of a Yid. The way the melubash beguf, here we say has no shaychus to a goy. And there's two ideas. The first idea is make for me a small feast. I should have pleasure from you. So the Rebbe says this small feast. I wrote on the margin, but small means bittul, because bittul is the key to simcha, but I don't know. Is something which has a shaykhs only to a yid. The Ketan is talking about the deepest levels of the Neshama. That although HaPayel is Gama Laguf affects the body, but it's still in the Pnimi V'yatzmi. And this is only by a yid, because the guy doesn't have such a Neshama. We discussed in the previous memorandum. Shagam, Sham Shachad Rosh Hashanah Pnimi Shalmaila, Rosh Hashanah, what comes forward is the Pnimis of Elokis. This is also created in a way which is not the rifya, not weak. And therefore, even the outer world is different. Because of the Gili Pnimis of Elokus, although in Rosh Hashanah the Eibishter's Chais was not interrupted from the Chitzenius, but before the renewal of the Pnimis, the Chitzenius was only in a state of rifya. And when the Eibishter renews the Pnimius, the Chitzenius is not berifyin, and therefore the Chitzenius is affected, but the Pnimius the Kam Shach. And this first idea is only for Yidden, because it's happening in the Yiddish Neshama. If I may tie it in to the Maimorim before, we're going to connect this to the notion of Yisrael of Machshav, that how could a Yid renew it? Because the Yid is Moshe Shenatzmus, and the place where the Shenatzmus is nobody else is present. And at Shmini Atzeres this is revealed, and therefore it's the Chol of Avoda, ואין, לזרים. And he says, such as the Jewish people, the soul, which is Chelik, man Neshama lebeshes beguf, it's the portion of the Neshama which is inside the body. And nevertheless, that the Madreg of the Neshama which is called Yachel, which is even higher than Yechido, is bihislapshus in the guf in the state of klita. Or mavaya kagdush ad marazakin, which is even Yechidish of the Nefesh. Or commission is bayel elech sheyichid b'kab b'yachal, talking about Yechidah, which is connected to Yachid, and in the previous Maimed, 2 Maimed ago. We explained the difference in different aspects based on what the Rebbe said in the Maimed, plus what says in other Maimedim between the union of Yechidah and Yachid and how they join together, which is nitzutz beiri. Rebbe says. The Mashapela B'Rashan De Kava Meridus, what we accomplished during the Yom Neraim through Meridus. Pela B'Shmini Atzeres V'Simchas De Kava Simcha, we accomplished with Simcha. And that's the answer to the question. The question the Rebbe asked in the beginning of the Maimer was, Teicha Inyan Ha'no Shal Maila, what is Hashem's pleasure? And the answer is our joy. Because our joy in Simchas Teira is equal to the awesome avoid of the Yom Neraim B'Kav Hayira, and our joy is His delight. And that's the Su'udah Ketanah, the Shenim Mekem, Hashem wants that pleasure from the Yid. Not from the Yid feeds him, from the Yid himself. When you're talking about the Yid making a feast for the Eibishter, you don't even have to say, they're not in the picture in the first place. And this is talking about the Yiddish Neshama. It's talking about the Yisrael Olav Machshava, the Yiddish Neshama. There's only a Yid in the Eibishter. And obviously, therefore, it's Atzeres Tia Lachem Ve'in Lezari Mitacha. A guy has no shaykhs in Shmini Atzeres, because the Simcha they reveal on this date, in Ifan of Klita, is exclusive to the Jewish people. When you understand that we're talking about the relationship between Yidden and the Eibishter, which is only about the Neshama, where Goyishkeit has no shaykhs, you can also add that it says it's Malachim Maluch. Not that the Eibish is a Melech, but that we're all Malachim. They call Yisrael Malachim Heim. All Yidden are kings. That through the Avoda Tamuchuni Aleichem Rosh Hashanah we made the Eibish into a king. So it's at Midya we can get Midya. All Yidden. Bayom HaShmini Atzeres the Elokis. That every Yid in the Madrega of Melech. Name of Reimamus. So this is the Avoda of Shmini Atzeres to be Kailat Atzmas Amus in the Neshama. Now, when the Maimer of Ulakachtam Lachem, the Rebbe said in the Nefesh HaElokis alone is lower than the Nefesh HaElokis and Nefesh HaBahamis. But in the other Maimer, in the Maimer of Shmini Atzeres Tia Lachem, the implication was, in the Maimer, Sukkot Teishu Shivas Yomagol Ezech Versal Yeshu B'Sukkos, the Avoda of the Neshama by itself is higher than the Nefesh HaBahamis, and I don't think they're mutually exclusive; they're mutually inclusive. In one aspect, the Avoda of Nefesh HaBahamis is higher, but when you get past that, there's an even higher Madrega, which is Ve'en Lezari Mitach. But then the Rebbe concludes on the Midrash HaBeis. There's the second Midrash, and the second Midrash it says the Mashal of Melech Shama Beiv Negagla Niva Atah. The king says to his best friend, let's find the leftovers from the Seudah that was made for everybody, and let's enjoy ourselves. Which is afilu mitzad yaguf. That even when it comes to matters of Gashmias and Birudim, here also there's a relationship between Yidden and the Eibishter that the Goy has no shaykhs to. The mitzad Gashmias aguf aredeim umas ha'elam, even though as far as the physical body is concerned, we're the same as Goyim. Nevertheless, we say, why? I don't know. But there's 2 points. A point that was made before and a point that's going to be made soon. The point that was made before on page 32 was because Neshamas come into this world in such a way that their Sheidish HaMokar is revealed in the Neshama Malabeshes Baguf. Nasa all the Spinukit Masena says the Zed that Atzilus is speaking to B'riyah. That although everything comes through all of Ishtalshalos, but most things come through Ishtalshalos, that includes Goyim, it includes Malachim, that when it comes from a higher world to a lower world, its connection to the higher world is because it's B'Islapshas Gemuda is hidden and lost. And by Yid it's B'derach Ma'ivir. So the Yiddish Neshama, as it comes into this guf, experiences its Sheidish HaMokar, and it brings out the mile of the Neshama as the Neshama is by itself. Su'udah Ketanish enemy camp. And even in the Birudim of the world, which is Tzarech Bir, B'diyak, what is it when it comes to the Birudim of the world, what makes Yidden special? But over there also we say, Ein Lazar Mitacha. And on the next page, page 34, the Rebbe is going to have the idea of Das. That the Bimavarer Gashmias and Bechol L'Checha the Ehu has a Shayches Dafke to Neshamas Yisrael. V'yesh Loimar. Now the V'yesh Loimar on the one hand goes on the 2 ideas that we just discussed, but on the other hand, this next paragraph is really following the idea, the second Midrash about Bayom HaShmini Atzeres Lachem, that even in Dvarim Gashmim there's an al-madrege which is l'chol lebadach ve'en lezrim. It says in Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah with Breaches Baruch Hashem Shmaim v'Sa'oretz, and the Rebbe says Shamayim is the first Midrash, which is in Yonim Ruchnim, which is Sudah Ketanik Jeremy Kem, which goes on the Neshama alone. And over there you don't have to say in Zarim Mitchach, he has no shaykhs in the first place. And Oretz is Gashmim, physical things. And Aguf, that although Shemitzad Aguf, second line from the bottom of 33, Nidme b'chumer yusel Agufim with Elam, the outer appearance of the physical body is identical to Yidden Hafla Goy, which is why Mitzadeh Shaychina Bechira Chavshis B'Yisrael Dafla Shaychina Bechira Chavshis. So there's a kvetch here. You find a place where Yidden and Goyim are the same, and nevertheless you say L'chol Avadach Avein Lezrim Mitach. There is a Nina Bechira Chavshis. Although, when it comes to the guf, when it comes to birudim, or the lashon of the Maimonim before, when it comes to the idea of misha in lakarke any other, you have to make a deal leisbarach b'tachtenim Yidden and Goy are equal, ata v'chatonim v'kol ha'amim and the madreig of the guf, and this is revealed in Shmini Atzeres. How does it manifest? The hainu, that the idea that there's a space within the relationship between Yidden and the Eibishter, where a Goy has no shaykhs. In addition to that being on the level of the Neshama, it exists also on the level of the guf, first of all because of the Obana B'chatim B'kalam B'loshen, and second of all because of the Avoda of a Yid. Shepoyel gam onyani aguf, that in the physical activities of a Jew, which has in common with a Goy, like the Rebbe spoke in the Malachim of Sukkos, there's something about a Yid's Avoda which exceeds even that of a Goy who's serving the Eibishter with Gashmi. Let's turn to page 34. Sheyeh b'hem, there should be in the Avoda that a Yid does, not just in Yonim of Teirah mitzvahs, but also the ideas of Bechol D'Lachecha De'ehu. In all our ways we should know HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Das is Lashon Hiskashrus, Das from the word Hiskashrus. And the Rebbe says, in Klipa there is no Das, and he's talking not just about Goyim, he's talking also about Malachim. Now, there is Das, and I'm going to assume that he's talking about Das Eliyah. Kimevur be'inyin shtei tziborim. The Beluma is the aim by Mechel. It says it's a sugi. Shtei tziborim is a sugi in Chassidus in Lekutei Torah. I'm assuming in Pashas Mitzero. He's Mitzayin to Pashas Chukas. Lekutei Torah in Pashas Chukas. The aim by Mechel Das, and this is why Ein Lezrim Mitach. The Rebbe is going to say on the top of page 32 that by Yidden there's Zera Adam and Zera Behema, and by a Goy there's only Zera Behema. There's no such thing as Das. No thing as Das. And this is another explanation for why we say in Shmini Atzeres, Yehil l'chol levadach ve'en lezrim mitach. So the Neshama alone, it's obvious. So the guf of the Nefesh HaBahamis it's not so obvious, because the Chayda Goy also has not only a goof, but he has the Avoda of a goof, especially when you're thinking about physical things. He says, number one, because of this goof, there was the Obana B'chira Chavshe, so the Eibishter and the Neshama Yisrael, so with the Melubish Beguf Davke. And number two, this Zayiv Das, B'chol Drachecha De'eyu, that in eating and drinking you can find God. This is something that only a Yid can do. That's what he's saying. And to think out loud, you have in Chassidus, that a Goy can bring a korban, but he can't bring a shlama. When a Goy brings a korban, he gives it away to the Eibishter. There's no such thing as sitting at the same table with the Eibishter and you and him eating together, only by a Yid. That's a shlama. And that's the Yin Das, that in your eating and drinking you can come to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is how, on Shmini Atzeres we say that the L'chol Avadach Ve'en Lezrim is not only in the Avoda of the Neshama by itself, but it's true in the Guf as well. It affects the physical world. This business of the renewal that happens on Rosh Hashanah, which comes by Makaf and Sukkot and B'pnimius and the Lulav and the B'sukkot Teshuvah and Beklit and Shmini Atzeres on a level affects the entire world. There should be added Chadasha, a new world, which is when Mashiach comes, which is going to affect, or which is connected to the Yevteira Chadasha, which is going to result in Shmaim Chadasha and Eretz Chadasha. And I couldn't help it, right on the margin, there's a Teira Chadasha, Eretz Chadasha, and Shmaim Chadasha. The only thing that Chadash is the Kenyamid Zanachim V'Shimchim. Yidden are the same. The Shema, the Zer of Yidden is eternal. Everything is renewed, and a Yid bleibt the Zelber. Begula Seinu Hamitis Vaidei Vashlem the Mashiach said Keinu, and in the later years the Rebbe says take of Miyad Mamish rather than Bakar of Mamish. So we learned the beginning and the end. We learned the two Midrashim. We explained Shmini Atzeres. Shmini Atzeres is the end of Tishrei, but at this point the Goyim and the Malachim fall away, even though they were involved until now in the Avoda and in the Simcha and in the Schar and in the Yeluyim. And he explains why Yihyu both beside the Neshama as well as the Guf of the Nefesh HaBahamis. Now we go back to the first page and we read the Sugya of Yihyu, which to me is divided into two parts. Number one, that it goes on Goyim, and I have to say that it means Goyim who are Elecha Goyim, who are keeping Sheva Mitzvot Neneach, they're part of the Aluas Avaya called Goyim, and nevertheless Shmini Atzeres is Ein Lazar Mitcha. And number two, that it goes on Malachim. So if you go back to page 30, you can read the number 10. It's 4 lines in, generally the question is, what is it about Shmini Atzeres that makes it exclusive to the Jewish people? Which is explained based on the pasuk Ve'in, lezrim, which is a pasuk in Mishlei. This is for you alone, no other zar, no other alien has a place with it. Kimavu ben Medrash, as the Medrash says, in 2 places. First of all, it says it's only for Yidden, the union of the lunar, the mix of the lunar and solar calendar, Kiddush al Chaydish and Iber Shanim is only for Yidden, and it goes also on Bezdin. And it's only for Yidden. The question is, who are these aliens that you would think have a shaykhis? And you have to say that nevertheless they don't have a shaykhis. That you would think they have a place, and you say that they don't have a place. Now, according to what we just finished, it only works in the second aspect, the avoid of the guf of the Nefesh HaBahamis, because when it comes to the Neshama Lechatchila, they have no shaykhis. When it comes to avoid the guf of the Nefesh HaBahamis, when it comes to Shmini Atzeres, you have to exclude them. Why are they connected dafka to the union of Pesach and the new calendar and Shmini Atzeres? That they're negated when you say Chedesh Elochem and Atzeres Ti Elochem. Now, frankly, the Rebbe does not answer this question. He explains the Benegay to Shmini Atzeres, but he doesn't explain the Benegay to Chedesh Elochem B'Tzarechiyah. And then you go to the middle paragraph on page 30, where the Rebbe says Acha Inyan Hu, and he begins to develop the Inyan of Zoros. And everything that Rebbe is trying to do from the bottom of 30 until near the bottom of page 32 is to actually put the Zodim on a pedestal, not to say you're excluding nobodies. Excluding nobodies is not an exclusion, it's self-understood. He's going to raise the Zodim up to a high level and say that in spite of how great the Zodim are, when it comes to Shmini Atzeres, they're excluded. And he explains. When he says over here that aliens have no business, it doesn't mean entities that are so alien that excluding them is almost self-understood. Talking about entities that belong. They belong in the relationship with the Eibishter in his world. They belong even in the relationship with the Eibishter in his world that involves the Jewish people. But right here, there's Zor. And he gives 3 examples from Torah. Example number 1. When you anoint someone a Kohen Gadol, there may be more than one candidate. And before they chose one over the others, they were all in the running. And the minute they choose, like Rashi says, the other guys become Zorim. A Kohen who could theoretically be the Kohen Gadol. Once they choose which one to anoint, Nikra Zor le'inyan zeh. He's considered foreign when it comes to this idea. Similarly, when you say on Shmini Atzeres, Ein Lazarim Mitacha, you're dealing with such entities that are Zarim in context, because without the context, they're not Zarim at all. That when you choose someone to be a king, and of course, Kol Yisrael, there's one of the Maimonim that Rabbi said, every Yid could be a Melech. Oh, I learned it in the Gemara Masechta Hades, that any Yid could be a Melech. At the end of this Maimer, we just looked at before near the bottom of page 33, the Rebbe said, every Yid becomes a Melech at Shmini Atzeres. But you choose one to be the actual Melech Yisrael, and at that moment the others become Zorim. The Rebbe says, I'm moidin de kavart here. Same is to the Levim. The Levim, we know in Halacha there's 2 categories of Levim, those who sing songs, those who lock gates. And you know, the Gemara says that Rambam brings that you're not allowed to change jobs. And there's a suggestion that if a Mesheder becomes a Sheir, or a Sheir becomes a Mesheder, for that alone is Chayav Beis. It always bothered me. Why are we so strict about the Levim's jobs? So look what the Rebbe does. Look at this. Beklalos, who in Moshe Shadal Levim. Moshe is the Mesheder, Moshe is the Levi who sings, and all the rest of the Levim protect. In other words, Levim are Gvura. Included in the Gvura is keeping people out who don't belong in, and included in the Gvura is singing songs. The Levi who sings the songs is the Madrega of Moshe Rabbeinu, Gvura, which is higher than Chesed. And the Levi, which excludes everybody from coming in where they don't belong, is the rest of the Levim, which is Gvura, that's lower than Chesed. And all of a sudden, the significance of Mesheder becomes very, very pointed and very significant by making this distinction. And the Rebbe doesn't explain it much, and I'm really curious to know if the Rebbe is saying this on his own, or this says in the Chassidus and earlier Rabbi. Those who sing songs versus those who guard gates. Each one. When it comes to the work of the other is a Zor. The same is true here. When you say you're dealing about the kinds of people or kinds of creations which really are not foreign. And nevertheless, when Shmini Atzeres comes, you make an announcement. Now they're not included. They're all members of the country. They all came together with the king's favorite to the meal on Sukkot, like the Rebbe said in the second Pirush in the previous paragraph. That is the same meaning of the Chag HaSukkos. Nevertheless, Shmini Atzeres comes, you say to the rest of the people, sorry, not here. Which is a dos ha-Torah. The Torah is announcing that although you're dealing with such entities, and as you'll see in the next 2 pieces, it's talking about Goyim lahavnu, who have a shaychas to the Shivim Parim and the brachas that it brings. And Malachim, when it comes to Shmini Atzeres, that av sheyesh tzvara shiu itecha, that makes sense they should belong, because they belonged until now, you consider Zorim. Shmini Atzeres excludes them. It includes even Malachim, and even the highest Madrigas of Malachim, which is the Sheder Shemakel and Malachim with the Malachi Asharis. And I'm thinking as I'm reading this that the Rebbe is Miramis to it says in the Maimed Bim Yashti Yosef, Tavshin Lamed Aleph, which is the Yud Aleph Nis Maimed, that includes even the Svidus, and even the Elokis Lagabe Yatzmus. Everything is Yil L'chol Avadacha Ve'in L'Zarim Mitacha. Malachim Ad Nashaychas over there, Goyim Ad Nashaychas over there, maybe even the Svidus. Says the Malachi Asharis, Kulam the Kroim B'Shem Zarim, but you have in Ramban, in Parshas Vayechi by Hamalach HaGoyel, and in Parshas Mishpatim, Behine Neche Shaliach Malach, that most Malachim are Nivdalim, are creation, and some Malachim are like the Svidus. And when he says here, Gam Malachi Asharis, the remez is that even Malachim, or the Dreg of the Svidus, when it comes to Shmini Atzeres, it's a Chol Avadach Avein L'Zarim Mitach. So Zor doesn't make you bad, Zor makes you very special. And nevertheless, Lagabi Dem Inyi B'Stazar. We're near the bottom, page 30, number 13. V'hinei mizeh, from the fact that we're defining Ein L'Zarim Mitacha, not as being somebody that's not Eilal Shulchan Malachim, that's not Bedora De'una, because that's a Davar HaPoshet. but rather somebody of significant chshivas, and they're only zor when it comes to the Shmini Atzeres. So the Rebbe says, Mochrach, this indicates and makes certain that we agree that every Jew is above those zorim, whoever those zorim are. And we're now saying, he gave us 3 examples, one from a potential melech, from Kohen Gadol, one from a potential melech, and from the shoyerim and the meshoyerim. That zor is a contextual thing, but the zor could be in a very high level. And you're excluding, as you'll see soon, all b'nei noyach, and I'm understanding that it means b'nei noyach, keep the Shabbat mitzvah, and malachim. But on the other hand, you're saying there's zorim, but every single Jew is included in Bayom HaShmini Atzeres tiyeh lachem. So this establishes that kol echad misal, every single Jew, in the simplest yid, has a shayches to Shmini Atzeres, even though zorim of all levels are excluded. Hine b'Shmini Atzeres, and he explained Shmini Atzeres we discussed earlier in the class, but later in the Maimer, because we already learned the second half of the Maimer. It's the absorption and the internalization of all the ideas that are connected to Rosh Hashanah. And what does Rosh Hashanah says? Because b'Shabbos lifnei Rosh Hashanah. If you want, when it says Rosh Hashanah, go back to the Shabbos before. When we say At and Nitzav Mayim, and Mayim goes on Rosh Hashanah. That even though there's 10 types of Jews, Shechem, Sheftechem, Ziknechem, Shetrechem, Keli Shitro, Tapchem, Neshechem, Gercha, Chetev, Tzechoshev, Meimechem. Nevertheless, we say that Koilish Yisrael, all Yidden are included. And what are they included in? Like it says in Targum Yenedin Rabbah. So At and the Tavim Hayim goes on Rosh Hashanah. Ve'ein, we say about Rosh Hashanah. At and the Tavim Hayim Kolchem. Every single Jew, from the greatest to the smallest, from the most sophisticated to the simplest, from the holiest to the most plain, is Lifnei Avaya Lekechem, is included in being in a state of nitzav, standing with a certitude. Lifnei Avaya Lekechem, literally it means in front of Hashem Lekechem. And Bepnimis it means hide the madrega of Shem Avaya and Shem Elokim from the madregas of Hashechem became the highest of the Jews until Chet Evitzech of Hashem Meimach Shemeid Hashechem from the level of the Jews that's called head until Sheyev Meimach the level of the Yid which is called a water carrier. Kulam Eimdim Lifnei Avaya Lekechem, those standing in madrega which is in front of or beyond Bepnimis of Avaya Lekechem. So before Rosh Hashanah, we're in a madrega of Adu Shabim Kulch. Then Rosh Hashanah comes, and because of our position, Lifnei Avaya Lekechem, we're in a position to renew the Melucha, which departs on Rosh Hashanah. And as we discussed later in this Maimer, that then it comes down to the Pnimius of Tainug, and the Pnimius of Ratzon, the Pnimius of Chachma Bin, the Pnimius of Malchus, the Pnimius of Machshava Dibur Amaisa, and then it also affects the Chitzenius, that the creation should not be in a state of Rifi and Yadayim. This all happens in Rosh Hashanah. And what follows after Rosh Hashanah is that all of this unique power and accomplishment, the Yiddish and Neshama are on a very high level to start with, and they're able to do the Eibish's Melucha and bring the Melucha into this world. It's revealed in a state of Gila, and he divides it up into 3. Number 1, Sukkah is Simcha, and Simcha is Gila. That's a Kabbalah, right? Al Pi Chassidus, it's a different kav. Rosh Hashanah, the Yom Neroim, called Smeila Tachas Hareishi. It's a very powerful expression of Hashem. But the Tnua, the mood is Gvura. It's not a bitter or a sad or a negative thing, but it's a very, very intense thing. And then it says that on Simchas Teina, Shmini Atzeres, the same in Yonim. That you have a Yom Neroim and Kav Yida, you have on Sukkot and Simchas Teina and Kav Simcha. So it's all manifest in a very powerful experience, but the experience is an experience of Simcha. So Sukkot, it's makif, we're experiencing the joy, but it's enveloping us. And then li'acharei zeh b'pnimis, then it's internalized. And again, the way I taught you the previous Maimer, the internalization is 2 components. The obvious component is the lulav, which is the yinadas, like it says in Olay Marim. But also the basuk is teishvu, the idea that you settle the sukkah, that you affect that the sukkah should be in a way of yashva, also pnimis, which means that a level of godliness which is transcended, chaya, yechida, and yochid, is not only revealed to us in a kind of way that's be able to become one with us, but then the third madreg is Shmini Atzeres. Now in the previous Maimer, when he brought these 3 ideas, Makif and Pnimi and Shmini Atzeres, he called Shmini Atzeres Pnimius Mamish. But he didn't say what's the difference between Pnimius and Pnimius Mamish. Here he uses a different word. Shmini Atzeres Nimsha B'chinas Klita. Not only is the experience of Yechida, of the transcendent godliness, the pnimius of Elokis. Es penech havai avakesh, makshu foneh. Es penech havai avakesh revealed. And not only is it revealed in the kind of way that it becomes one with the person, it's revealed in the kind of way that it's absorbed by the person. It becomes who the person is. Now, we really deserve, the Maimed deserves that we should explain each one of these three things more specifically. But first of all, we don't have the time. Second of all, we don't have the language. Third of all, maybe we don't even understand it. But nevertheless, this is the process of Tishrei. You become Momed Elokis, and you bring the Elokis into your life, and it culminates with the highest levels of Elokis being maxim revealed in the person through the Simcha of Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Teid. Harei Shegam Shmini Atzeres, that even Shmini Atzeres, regarding which it's written Atzeres Lachem Ve'in Lezrim that very important entities that normally are along for the ride, so to speak, of Yamim Neroyim and of Tishrei B'chlal and of Sukkos B'frat. When it comes Shmini Atzeres, you say the Zarim are disincluded, whoever the Zar is. And like the Rebbe said before, the Zar is not some nobody. The Zar is someone so preeminent that he's worthy of being called a Zar, like two people who potentially could be the Kohen Gadol or the Melech, and then you choose one over the other. So the other one is considered a Zar, Lagabe the chosen Kohen Gadol, and Lagabe the chosen Melech. Similarly, whoever the Zar that's excluded from the Bayom HaShmini is a very prominent person, and at the same time, every single Jew, not just select Jews, are not part of the Zar group. They're all included. Sheyesh lehem iloi legabe elu hanikroyim b'shem Zar. Every single Jew, even the lowest Jew, and I hate to use the word the worst Jew, have a worthiness to be included, not just in the idea that a Chedesh Tishrei, the revelation of what's higher than the mind and the heart and the senses, higher than the Naran, higher than the Neshama, which is in the Guf, the Makifim, Chaya, Yachida, Yochid, and not just in a way where you go up to it, but in a way that you bring it into your life in the form of the joys of Sukkos and the Lulav and Simchas Beis HaSheva, and then the deepest of all these joys is Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Teira. Every Jew belongs to all of that, including the Klita of Shmini Atzeres. So, first you explain that when you're speaking about a Zar, somebody who's outside, and you're saying that this Zar is along for the ride of Yamim Neroyim and Tishrei and Sukkos, but is disincluded in Shmini Atzeres. And then you say, on the other hand, every single Jew belongs to the Atzeres Lachem. It puts every Jew on this pedestal next to the Zar, even though the Zar is a very prominent entity, a prominent person or living thing. So every Yid is a shaykhis to the Inyan Pnimius of Shmini Atzeres, which, if you remember, we learned the end of the Maimed. This is the idea of Seuda Katana, which the Neshama makes for the Eibishter, which Klippa has no connection to. You don't even have to exclude Klippa. And then there is the idea that all the people are there, and then when it comes to Shmini Atzeres, which means goes on Klippa, you say that the Klippa is not included, the Nefesh HaBahamis is included in Sukkos. When it comes to Shmini Atzeres, it's exclusive for the Jewish people, even though you're being Mevarer Klippa. This has a shy, and of course the idea of Das, all of the points we made when we learned the end of this Maimed, is a connection to every single Jew. And even though, I'm on page 31 by the number 14, it's understood that the Zar that we're now excluding, yihyu lebdech, ואין לזרים. The Zar that we're now excluding, that the Rebbe underscores, is not an unworthy person or entity. He's incredibly worthy. But when it comes to Shmini Atzeres, he's called a Zar. Now the proof that he's prominent and important is because we bring 70 cows to correspond to these 70 Zarim on Sukkos, which means that these 70 Zarim, which goes on the 70 nations. Physically, it means the Goyim on this earth. Spiritually, it means the Malachim that represent these Goyim, which proves that these Zarim, in quotations, are worthy enough to be included in the Simcha of Sukkos. It says in Kabbalah Sfarim that the Korban Eila does the Ein Seif, that the secret of Karbanis becomes one with the secret of Ein Seif, which means that the Ayin Umes and the Malachim of the Ayin Umes, which correspond to the Ayin Potter brought on Sukkos, have a connection to the idea of being Eila does the Ein Seif. This idea of Karbanis, that Karbanis is Eila does the Ein Seif, connected to Atzmos and Savarach, which Shaykhs to Goyim also, and certainly to the Malachim that represent the Goyim. So the Rebbe is putting Goyim on a high level. How high a level are Goyim on that they're included in the Avoda of Sukkot. And again, the Rebbe doesn't say it, but l'chayr, if they're there in Sukkot, then the Yom Neroim, they're for sure there. But let's not presuppose. They have a shaykhs to Sukkot. Now, I want to add, because this is my obsession, that the Rebbe talks so much about the of Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Neach, and that a guy who keeps the Mitzvah B'nei Neach could be a Ben Neach, and a Ger Teishav, and a Chsidium Elam, and he has a shaykhs to Elam Haba. Right, Kol Boy Olam could be in the Madrega of Kodesh Kadoshim, like it says in the end of Shmini Atzeres, that goes even on Goyim, that he has an option of separating himself from the Heavenly Azman and involving himself in serving the Eibush and learning his Torah, and he could raise himself into the Madrega of Kodesh Kadoshim, that Avayihu Chalcha v'Nachaloscha, which the way we understand the word Boy Olam includes even in theory a Goy. When it comes to Shmini Atzeres, he's a Zor. That even though Goyim have the possibility to have a very meaningful relationship with the Eibush, not just in the sense that they're doing what he says, and therefore they have a chiluk and amabot, but they can have a connection to the Eibush, which is defined by the idea that a korban raises them till Raza Dehein Save. But Shmini Atzeres they're not allowed in. And at the same time, every Yid is. So the Rebbe says, in order to explain how special Shmini Atzeres is, you have to explain how special the Zor is, the one being excluded is. And so far, the one being excluded goes on the Goyim and the Malachim of the Goyim. Later on, the Rebbe is going to mention the Malachim, but in the meantime, he's talking about Goyim. But he's talking about the kind of Goyim that are involved in the Ayim Param of Sukkot, and they're holding by the Avoda of Raza the Korban, Eila Raza Insev. If you could imagine the perfect Goy, and in my mind, the prototypical Goy is Eiv. That in theory, the Gemara says he could have been like Avraham Avinu, but he wasn't. But he was a Navi. And he was a servant of the Eibishter. He was Ish Tam B'Yosher V'Yirei Lekim V'Sar Meirah. He was a very special man, and he has a very deep connection to the Eibishter. And he has a shaykhs to avoid in the Beis HaMikdash, including the Ayim Parim which we brought on Sukkot. So when it comes to Shmini Atzeres, you say this is not for you. And who is it for? Every Yid, even the simplest Jew, even a Jew who, in terms of his avodah, may not look as holy as Eiv. This is l'chol levadecha ve'ein lezrim. So this is what the Rebbe is trying to bring out both sides. A, the Zara is a great person. B, every Yid is worthy of being included in a category where the Zarim are excluded. And then the Rebbe continues. This is also what you have in so many places. And we say about Yom Kippur and Avodah of Yom Kippur. At the Kohen, God goes into the Kodesh HaKadosh. And we know a rule that any time the Kohen went into the Avodah in the Mishkan, the Kshtedes, everyone had to clear out from the Bein Ulam Mizbeach, the Heichal Ulam Mizbeach. And when he goes into the Kodesh HaKadosh, we have to clear out the Heichal and the Ulam. Right? The king, the person being Mak the Kshtedes, has to be all by himself. And the Lashon HaPasuk is V'chalo Dom Liya Be'el Meid V'Geim, and no human being is allowed to be in the Beis HaMikdash, in the inner room or the outer room. When the Kohen God goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, so when it says V'chal Adam Avua B'Yerushalmi, that when it says V'chal says Yerushalmi, Dafilu Eis, and even those Shekasav B'Hed Pnei Adam, those regarding which it is written, their face is the face of Adam, Lo Yihyu Be'el Meid, not allowed to be in the Beis HaMikdash. Now, who is included in Pnei Adam? So clearly, it's talking about a group of Malachim that are not like Shade and Aryeh and Nesher, but they're like Adam. That these Malachim are excluded. It also includes, of course, Einam Yehudim, that are excluded from the Madrega of God. They're not allowed to be in the Beis HaMikdash. Can God is there alone, even though in the Bechina of Adam. And perhaps it means even Elokis, even Atzilas, Adam Ha'elyon. When the Ken Gadol goes into the Kodesh HaKadosh, it means the Eibush that even Adam Ha'elyon is higher than Adam. And somehow every Yid is connected to this. The Ken Gadol goes in and everybody clears out, including the Malachim, including the Neshamas, including the Elokis. And the Ken Gadol meets Atzmos, which is above Adam, all by his lonesome. But, says the Rebbe, Masha Ken Gadol Nichnas, the ability of the Ken Gadol to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim and have this meeting with the Eibishter, it's not as he is an individual, but as he includes every Jew. And he's representing every Jew. So the Rebbe says, therefore, when the Ken Gadol goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, every Yid is going into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And the Malachim are not allowed. The Adam is not allowed. And like I said before, the Lachede, it could include also Adam Ha'elyon. You can include Adam of Atzilus, Adam of Elokis. Says the Rebbe Harei, emphasis, Gama Malachim, even the Malachim, which are the source of the Shivim Umes. Right before the Rebbe said that Yihyu lebdech ואין לזרים includes the Gashmis Dikagoyim that bring the 70 Purim. Now he's bringing the Malachim that are the source of the Shivim Umes. Nikroyim zorim lagabi kolechet bisol. When it comes to the Jewish people, these Malachim are outside, and although they're included in the Avoda of Sukkot, they're not included in the Avoda of Yom Kippurim, and they're not included in the Avoda of Shmini Atzeres. Which is the Pshat in the Gemara, in the Midrash, that we all know that Mechitzos and Shal Tzadikim, the spot, the area of Tzadikim is Lefnim, Mechitzos and Shabbat is higher than the Madrega Malach. Right? On one hand, we need the Malachim to get us closer to the Eibishter, but on the other hand, we can eventually surpass the Malachim and be Lefnim Mechitzos, because the Sherish of Neshama Yisrael is higher. And that's why we're Zeicher to be connected to the Eibishter and Shmini Atzeres. When you have these very special Giluyim, where the Elokis comes downward, first in Makif, and then in Pnimius, and then in Klito, and in an Even of Das, and it's only for the Jewish people. This also explains another Ma'ameh Chazal. First of all, the idea that Neshama is higher than Malach. But second of all, the Gemara says, when Mashiach comes, all tzaddikim are going to call the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The very last page of the Minor Lush, it says that Yidden are going to be called by the Eibishter's name, or Pirish Rashi Sham Shehei Shmam Shem Havaya. That Ebi is going to be called by the Eibishter's name, which is higher than Shem Elokim, which is Lashon Rabbi. So, Neshama Yisrael, B'chlal, their Mechit of Lefnimi Malachi Asharis, and L'Asad Lavi, the relationship between Yidden and the Eibush is going to be in the Madrega of Shem Havaya. And the Rebbe says, V'yamich Cholam Tzadikim. It doesn't only mean Tzadikim, every single Jew is included in this category that is Lefnimi Malachi Asharis. And then L'Asad Lavi is going to be called B'Shmei Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every Jew is connected to all of these inyanim, to the idea of being included in Shmini Atzeres, to the idea that Mechitzasenu is Lefnimi Mechitzas Malachi Asharis, and that La'asad are going to be called B'Shmei Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But he continues, says, even though we say La'asad Lavi Yikra Shmei Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the idea already exists now. Or for example, a chest, Shesh Be'evan Yikar, which has a precious stone inside, but it's Segura V'chasum, it's locked and it's sealed. So you don't have access to it directly. Nevertheless, but it's yours. And even though you may not be able to open it at the moment, it's already yours. The idea is that after Mashiach comes, we're all going to be Lefnimi Malachi Asharis, and we're going to be in the Madrega of Shem Havaya, that Oz Yibegili. Then it's going to be revealed. Spiritual, those days exist now also. Because it's ours now for the taking later. But more importantly, we affect it now. Through the work we do during the 6 millennia of creation. But specifically, it says in Tanya Pei Zion that we accomplish it through Masseinu V'Deseinu Meshach Zman HaGolus. So the Rebbe says the Zorim are very high levels. It goes on very righteous Goyim. It goes on Malachim. And they're not included in the Avoda Shmini Atzeres. And every Yid is. Why? What makes Yidden so special? That a place where Malachim cannot come, a place where the biggest, most righteous Goy cannot come, even the simplest Jew is allowed. And here's the answer. Nefesh HaElokis, the divine soul of every Jew, even the simplest of Jews, is a piece of godliness from on high, mamish. Now you know in these Maimorim, there's a notion of being Makasher Chelek B'Ha'etzem, which was explained connecting Yechida to Yochid, as we've learned in the earlier Maimorim in this Tishrei. But every Jew has the Chelek and the Etzem, the Yechida and the Yochid. That Shesh Gimel Dargis Ben Neshama is all kinds of souls. Neshama is that Tzilas souls of Atzilas Mamish, which are Mamish Madrega Vein Seif. Neshama is Atzilas Shebebriya. The Neshama is in Elam Abriya, but they have the property of Atzilas, which L'chayda means that they will give in Neshama not in Seif. And then there's Neshama Sabiyah, which are in the Madrega of Nivra. There's no Elokis in those Neshamas, not Atzilas Mamish, and not Atzilas Shebebriya. In general, the souls are divided into 2 groups. Zera, Adam, the seed of Adam, like it says in Chassidus, that's the Madrega of Da'aseli. And Zera Behema, the seed of Behema, although it's also an Adam, and it has Das. But it only has Das Tach and doesn't have Das Elyon. So there's all kinds of Neshamas. There's Neshamas that are so intimate with the Eibishter that the Eibishter is their natural truth. There's Neshamas that are so worldly that the Eibishter is completely hidden from them. And in between, there's Neshamas who have a natural relationship with the Eibishter, but it's not a relationship with the Eibishter which is connected in the Madrega of Ein Seif, but it's limited to Neshama, to Seichel. So there's all kinds. Says the Rebbe Harei, Mevur Belukut Teira Dibra Maschel Shcheira Nivanova. It nevertheless says in Chassidus, Shagam HaNeshamas Shababri, even the lowest category of Neshamas, Yesh Bem HaBittel VaHa'ava. They have a bittel to the Eibishter. They have what's called Shmini Atzeres, which is explained at length in chapters 18 and 19 of Sefer Tanya Kadisha, that every Jew has what's called a Pintel Yid. An Shmini Atzeres, a love for the Eibishter which is hidden, and this hidden love for the Eibishter is for all intents and purposes an infinite love. Va'adarabba v'chulu. And to be sure, etc. Now what is the v'adarabba v'chulu? I think the v'adarabba v'chulu is saying that in certain ways the lowest neshamas have a greater capacity for mesiras nefesh than greater neshamas. Right? It's easier to put your foot into boiling water than your head, like it says in the Maimer, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'tunya ha'yadua reish mamches. It says in Tanya Perikut Ches, Shegam Nefesh, the Malchus Asiya, the souls of the lowest Madregas, and the lowest Madregas, and the lowest Spheres. In the lowest word is Klula, Mikula, Mishkus, Chachmat Atzilas, Shavamalu, Mishain Sei Baruch Hu Mamish. So all Neshamas have Ein Seif inside of themselves. And this V'yad Rabbi seems to be implying that maybe in a certain aspect the lowest Neshamas have a more direct connection to the Ein Seif inside of themselves, and the power of Mesiras Nefesh, the power of Amunah, the power of Tshuva, and so on. V'zehu. And this idea, that even though there's all different kinds of neshamas, there is a property in every neshama which connects it to Ein Seif Mamish, which is the source of our Mesiras Nefesh and our Tshuva and our Amunah and so on. So this idea that although there's all different types of levels neshamas, every neshama has a direct connection to Ein Seif, is Shemavayir Behemshech Ha'inyan Shama. The Fidik Rebbe explains the Maimer from Tafshin Dalet. What says in Tikkun Ezeh Tikkun Samach Tes, and this was mentioned in the earlier Maimorim of this Tishrei. I think it was in Rosh Hashanah and Shabbos Tshuva, the first two Maimorim, Shiramal, Malachim, and Tshuva Yisrael, where he spoke about revealing the highest Madregas of Ratzon. That it says in Zayir as follows: V'ilein the Atzilus Amru Le'ilein the Bria. That the Spheres of Atzilus say to the Spheres of Bria, Nasa Adam B'Tavenu L'Kizenu L'Shon Ab. They created everything. But most creations are described as Vayem Elokim Yehi, Vayem Elokim Yehi. When it comes to the creation of a person, it says Nasa in plural Lashon Rabim. And of course Rashi says, why does it say Nasa Lashon Rabim? It says Rashi can't cover the Malachim, the Eibush is giving cover to the Malachim. That's how Rashi explains it. But the Zerg is an unbelievable explanation, and like I said, we had it in one of the earlier Maimorim, that Nasa Lashon Rabim, Adam B'Tzamenu Kidmusenu means let us together, the Spheres of Atzilus and the Spheres of Bria together create Adam Atach. So Neshamas are unique, that they're created from the Spheres not only in one world, but from many worlds. Atzilus, Bria. I'm by the number 17 on page 32. Kol HaNivroim Ba'am Atzilus. Isn't it true that every creation is created from Atzilus? So what's the chiddush of that Atzilus says to Bria Nasa? Atzilus is also called the world, because from Atzilus is the beginning of the process of creation. Then from Atzilus it goes into Bria, and the creations that started out on Atzilus, on the level of Elam Atzilus, are recreated in Bria, in the level of Elam Bria, and then in Yossi the Yitzir, and Spheres the Asiya. So everything is created from Atzilus. So what is unique about the idea of Nasa Adam B'Tzamenu Kidmusenu? So the Rebbe adds Sheheim Heim Esem Es Spheres. Although there's 4 worlds, and in each world there is 10 spheres, in a certain way it's exactly the same spheres. This is the reason why. You don't say that there's 40 spheres, 10 in Atzilus, 10 in Bria, 10 in Yitzir, 10 in Asiya, but rather that's only 10. Why? There's certainly not 40. Ba'im umishtalshalim lebriya uliyitzira ulasiya. The tame as the spheres natzilas become the spheres lebriya through a compromise, through a tzimtzum. Those same as the spheres become the spheres nitzira through another tzimtzum, and those same as the spheres become the spheres nasiya through a third tzimtzum. Like it says in Dagon, in Tanya Perik Nun Beis, Malchus HaMalchus Kol Elamim. There's many worlds, but there's one Malchus. And this Malchus is the Malchus of all of the world, because Malchus is Malchus Dein Seif, which becomes Atek Ta'atzilos, and then into all of the worlds till Bia and Asiya, and it all is still the Madrega of Malchus Dein Seif. So the Rebbe says, although there's many worlds, and each world has 10 spheres, we see them as the same spheres because it's really just coming into the next world as it is in the previous world with a slight modification. But in this, there's two madregas. There's a chitzonius deka madrega and a pnimis deka madrega. In the chitzonius deka madrega, we say that the spheres of Atzil, the spheres of Bria, but they're so changed that you identify them as Bria. You say that the spheres of Bria come into Yetzirah, but they're so changed that they identify the spheres of Yetzirah, and so on. Says the Rebbe, Harikol Zehu, by the number 18 in your text. When it goes from Atzilus into Bria, it stops being Atzilus. When it goes from Bria to Yetzirah, it stops being Bria, and so on. Mashenkin Neshamas, by Neshamas it's different. That Afapi, Shegam Neshamas, that Atzilus also have to go from Atzilus to Bria, to Yetzirah and Asiya, but it's Eivim, Bechinas Maivid, Al Kolpan, they pass through without without changing and adapting and becoming new in Elam Bria. And the reason for this is that Kadesh, for them to eat physical food and drink physical drink. The Neshama has to adapt from a world to a world until the Neshama can have a connection to a physical goof and eat physical food and drink physical drink. To explain them like Zechsidus, and it also makes common sense. Certainly Neshamas, the Beyados Neshamas, when they come into the lower worlds, in some ways, are cut off from Atzilus. They come into the lower world the way of Slapshas. Nevertheless, you can't compare to the fullest Slapshas which has made Nevrei. In other words, the Rebbe is doing something. There's a Hagah in Tanya Perik Nun Beis. Tanya Perik Nun Beis talks about the idea that things go from Atzilus to Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. First, the 10 spheres are created. Then the Malchus of each world creates the Tate of that world, the Neshamas of that world, the Levushim and Chol of that world, and then the spheres of the next world, right? 4 times over. So he says, Alter Rebbe says in that footnote, there's 4 worlds, and in each world there's 10 spheres. You should know, in spite of the fact that there's 4 worlds, in each world there's 10 spheres, the real truth is it's all the same. So the Rebbe says, when you say the real truth is all the same, there's 2 dimensions to this. There's the dimension of this, how it is in the world, and there's the dimension of this, how it is by Yidden, by Neshamas. The dimension of it is in the world, it's the tame sense fetus, but each time it goes from a world to a world, it loses its identity as it was in the former world. When it comes to Neshamas Yisrael, although the Neshamas go through Hishtalshalos, some more and some less, but the Hishtalshalos of Neshamas Yisrael does not cut them more from the Shedish HaMakim. So this Hagah in Tanya Perik Nun Beis, which says that although there's 10 spheres in every world, it's really the same 10 spheres, albeit, although it applies to the worlds at large, it applies particularly and much more deeply when it comes to Pnimius, when it comes to Neshamas Yisrael. Because when it comes to Pnimius and it comes to Neshamas Yisrael, the 10 spheres of the lower world are not cut off from the 10 spheres. To the contrary, they're revealing the higher world. And I think that what the Rebbe is trying to say here is that the Pshat and the Hagah and Tanya Perik Nun Beis, that although there's 10 spheres in every world, all the Malchuses are connected, they're one. All the Chochmas are connected, they're one, and so on. It's true to a degree even about Chitzenius Elamis, but it's far, far truer when it comes to Neshamas. Because although there's many levels of Neshamas, all the levels of Neshamas retain their connection, their revealed connection to the higher worlds. Valachein, which is why Nasa is Lashon Rab. When it comes to Neshama, it says, let us. Because all the spheres of all the 4 worlds, when it comes to Neshamas Yisrael, are so overtly connected. The spheres of Asiya, and the spheres of Yetzirah, and the spheres of Bria, and the spheres of Atzilus. Although B'Klal they're connected, but by Neshama Yisrael they're so connected that they talk to each other, Lashon Rabim. Let us create Neshamas Yisrael. Ve'ilan da Atzilus amru le'ilan de Bria v'cholu. The spheres of Atzilus speak to the spheres of Bria. Let us make Neshamas Yisrael, because all Neshamas Yisrael are connected to the Esses spheres in all 4 worlds, even Atzilus and Ein Seif. that Gam Neshamas the lowest Neshamas. Because Gam Neshamas the Biyah, even the lowest Neshamas of Biyah, his Havus and the way they're created, are the Gili as the Spheres Natsilas, as the Spheres the Bria, the revelation of 10 Spheres Natsilas into the 10 Spheres the Bria is such that it's not cut off, which is L'mayla Yesem Malachim. And this was special about Neshamas, all Neshamas. The lowest Neshama, the simplest Jew, has an advantage over the most righteous Goy, and has an advantage even over the greatest Malach. Because although they're also created from a higher world to a lower world, but they're created from a higher world to a lower world in the way that they're cut off from their source in the higher world, and the Neshamas Yisrael are not that way. And the Rebbe concludes, Malachim also considered alien when it comes to Neshamas Yisrael. And on Shmini Atzeres we say ואין, לזרים. Shmini Atzeres, there's the klita of all the inyanim nailim of Tishrei, and it's only for Neshamas Yisrael, but it's for every single Neshamas Yisrael. Even the simplest Jew is also called a tzaddik, and it's also called the Shmei Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's that way even now, as the Rebbe explained before, because the way Neshamas Yisrael are created, no matter how low they fall, they're always still a Elokis and connected to the Sheder Shema Kalamai. Like it says in Samach Vov, the Rebbe brings it in some of my Morim, that the Neshama is called Elokis Shenasa Nivra, even though it's a creation on the outside, but Pnimius is Elokis. Now at the very end of the Maimer, the Rebbe is going to bring that this Koyach of Neshamas Yisrael, that even Lamata the Elokis, shows itself in the Avoda B'chol Dorachecha de Yihyu, which is connected to Das, and Das is Shachas only in Kedusha, not in Klipa. And the implication is that it's not even Shachas by Malach. And that's what this Maimer is saying, Bayom HaShmini Atzeres Lachem, that in the Tishrei B'chlal, there's great revelations of godliness, but some of those revelations of Shachas to Malachim and to the 70 nations, Shmini Atzeres is ein, lezrim.